She looked the casting director straight in the eye and said three words that almost killed the most iconic romance in movie history: anyone but him. Jennifer Grey was already cast as Baby in what would become Dirty Dancing, and when producers suggested Patrick Swayze for Johnny Castle, her reaction was immediate and devastating. "I will not work with that man again," she said, her voice trembling with emotion from memories she'd tried desperately to forget. What happened next in a small rehearsal room in Manhattan would determine whether Dirty Dancing ever got made at all. And it all came down to 5 words Patrick Swayze whispered through his tears that would save not just a movie, but 2 careers, and give the world one of its most beloved love stories. It was March 1986, and Hollywood was about to witness one of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes battles in cinema history. A battle that started 2 years earlier in the harsh mountains of Colorado during the filming of Red Dawn, where Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze's professional relationship had exploded into something so toxic that neither of them wanted to remember those 8 weeks of hell. The wounds from that experience ran so deep that Jennifer was willing to walk away from the biggest opportunity of her career, rather than work with Patrick again. She would rather sacrifice her dreams than endure another day of what she called Patrick Swayze's reign of terror. But tonight, we're going to tell you the untold story of what really happened in that rehearsal room on a cold Tuesday morning in March. The story of how a 34-year-old Texan with a reputation for being difficult and controlling swallowed his pride, got down on his knees in front of his former victim, and delivered an apology so raw, so honest, and so completely vulnerable that it saved one of the greatest love stories ever put on film. This is the story of how Patrick Swayze's darkest professional moment became the foundation for his greatest triumph, and how 5 words spoken through tears transformed not just a movie, but the very souls of 2 people who thought they could never work together again. To understand why Jennifer Grey refused to work with Patrick Swayze, to comprehend the depth of hatred that burned in her heart when she heard his name, we have to go back to a scorching August day in 1984, when both actors were cast in John Milius's ambitious Cold War epic Red Dawn. The film was revolutionary for its time, imagining a world where the Soviet Union and Cuba invaded America, turning the heartland into a battlefield where teenagers became guerrilla fighters. Patrick, at 32, was cast as Jed Eckert, the natural-born leader who would forge a group of scared kids into hardened warriors. Jennifer, at 24, played Tony Mason, one of the resistance fighters who would learn that survival meant leaving innocence behind forever. It should have been the kind of ensemble project that creates lifelong friendships among the cast, the kind of intense shared experience that bonds actors for decades. Instead, it became a nightmare that Jennifer would later describe as the worst professional experience of my life, worse than anything I could have imagined. The problems didn't start immediately. They began slowly, like a poison seeping through the group dynamics during the 8-week military training camp that director John Milius had organized to prepare his young actors for the physical and emotional demands of guerrilla warfare. Milius was obsessed with authenticity. He wasn't content to simply teach the actors how to hold weapons properly or run convincingly through the Colorado wilderness. He wanted them to actually become the characters they were playing, to understand viscerally what it meant to fight for survival against impossible odds. So he hired real military advisors, seasoned veterans who had seen combat, to put the cast through an intense boot camp experience in the unforgiving Colorado wilderness. The idea was that by the time filming started, the actors wouldn't just be pretending to be a tight-knit unit of soldiers, they would actually be one. For most of the young cast, this training was exciting, challenging, even fun. C. Thomas Howell threw himself into the physical challenges with enthusiasm. Charlie Sheen treated it like an adventure. Leah Thompson approached it with the disciplined mindset of a trained dancer. But Patrick Swayze took this training more seriously than anyone else, more seriously than the actual military instructors had expected or wanted. Having grown up on a Texas ranch with a father who valued discipline, toughness, and the kind of masculine stoicism that never showed weakness, Patrick threw himself into the military exercises with an intensity that impressed the instructors but began to alarm his fellow actors. Patrick became Jed Eckert from day one of training. C. Thomas Howell recalled years later in an interview that revealed the true dynamics of that troubled production. He never broke character, not once. Even when we were just hanging out in the evenings around the campfire, even when we were eating dinner or just trying to relax after a brutal day of training, he was still the military leader, still giving orders, still treating us like we were really his soldiers instead of fellow actors trying to prepare for a role. For Jennifer Grey, who had grown up in a theatrical family in New York City with very different values about collaboration and creative expression, Patrick's behavior felt like something far more sinister than method acting. It felt like bullying disguised as dedication to craft. He would wake us up at 5 a.m. for extra training that wasn't even on the schedule, Jennifer recalled in a later interview, her voice still carrying the pain of those memories. He'd order us around like we were actually under his command, criticize our performance in front of everyone, even control what we ate and when we could take breaks. It was like he thought he really was our commanding officer, not just another actor who happened to be a few years older. But what started as overzealous method acting soon escalated into something much worse. Patrick began implementing his own unofficial punishment system for actors who weren't meeting what he considered to be proper military standards. If someone stumbled during a training exercise, Patrick would make them repeat it over and over again until they got it right, long after the official instructors had moved on to other activities. If someone complained about the harsh conditions, the freezing nights, the insufficient food, the physical exhaustion, Patrick would assign them extra duties that he had no authority to impose. "It stopped being about the movie," Jennifer said, her voice growing cold with remembered anger. "It became about Patrick's need to be the alpha dog, to prove he was tougher and more dedicated than everyone else. But more than that, it became about his need to dominate and control every person around him. He seemed to feed off the fear and resentment he was creating. The worse we felt, the more powerful he seemed to become." The breaking point came during the 5th week of training, on a particularly brutal Thursday morning when the Colorado weather had turned unexpectedly harsh. Snow was falling, the temperature had dropped below freezing, and the entire cast was exhausted from weeks of relentless physical and emotional pressure. Jennifer, who had been pushing herself to her absolute limits to avoid giving Patrick any excuse to single her out, made a small mistake during a weapons training exercise. She fumbled while trying to reload a rifle during a timed drill, a mistake that anyone could have made under those conditions. Instead of simply correcting her error or offering encouragement, Patrick stopped the entire group and delivered what several witnesses described as one of the most humiliating public dressing downs they had ever witnessed. For over 10 minutes, in front of the entire cast and crew, Patrick questioned Jennifer's commitment to the project, her professionalism, her work ethic, and even her right to be part of the production. "He didn't just criticize my performance," Jennifer recalled, her voice still emotional years later. "He attacked me as a person. He questioned my dedication, my intelligence, even my value as an actress. It was cruel and unnecessary and designed to break me down in front of everyone I had to work with." But Patrick wasn't finished. As Jennifer stood there fighting back tears of humiliation and rage, he continued his assault. He suggested that maybe she wasn't cut out for this kind of challenging role, that maybe she should consider whether she belonged on a serious film set at all. He implied that her struggles were holding back the entire production and that everyone would be better off if she approached her work with more dedication and less self-pity. By the time he finished, Jennifer was shaking with a combination of fury and devastation that she would carry with her for years. That night, Jennifer called her agent from the single payphone at the training camp, her hands still trembling with anger and humiliation. "I want off this movie," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't work with Patrick Swayze. I won't work with him. He's not an actor. He's a drill sergeant with a massive ego problem and a need to destroy anyone who threatens his sense of superiority." Her agent, recognizing the genuine distress in her voice, tried to talk her through the situation, reminding her of the potential damage to her career if she quit a major studio production without cause. But Jennifer had reached her breaking point. "You don't understand," she told her agent. "This isn't about being difficult or unprofessional. This is about surviving. Patrick Swayze has turned this production into his personal power trip, and I'm his favorite target. Every day I stay here, he finds new ways to humiliate me and break me down. I can't take another 6 weeks of this. I won't. Her agent eventually convinced her to stick with the production, but the damage to her relationship with Patrick was irreparable and complete. For the remaining 3 weeks of training and 6 weeks of filming, Jennifer and Patrick maintained a professional facade while privately despising each other with an intensity that shocked even them. Jennifer developed what she would later describe as a genuine fear of Patrick. Not physical fear, but a deep anxiety about what new form of psychological warfare he might employ against her. Patrick, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the damage he was causing, convinced that his harsh leadership style was bringing out the best in everyone around him. The entire cast and crew of Red Dawn could feel the poisonous tension between them. Patrick and Jennifer barely spoke to each other unless the cameras were rolling, remembered Powers Booth years later. When they had to do scenes together, you could literally cut the animosity with a knife. It was uncomfortable for everyone involved. We all knew something terrible had happened between them, but nobody wanted to get caught in the middle of whatever war they were fighting. Director John Milius was so concerned about their relationship affecting the quality of the film that he actually rewrote several scenes to minimize their interactions, even changing some of the story's emotional beats to avoid requiring them to share intimate or vulnerable moments on camera. The film that audiences saw in theaters was good, but it could have been extraordinary if two of its key performers had been able to work together instead of barely tolerating each other's presence. When Red Dawn finally wrapped in November 1984, Jennifer thought she would never have to see or speak to Patrick Swayze again. She was looking forward to putting those 8 weeks of misery behind her and moving on with her career and her life. She had learned valuable lessons about standing up for herself and recognizing toxic behavior, and she was determined never to put herself in such a vulnerable position again. She was wrong about never seeing Patrick again, and that mistake would almost cost her the role of a lifetime. 18 months later, in March 1986, Jennifer's agent called her with news that seemed too good to be true. She had landed the lead role in a small independent film called Dirty Dancing. The script was absolutely beautiful, a coming-of-age story about love, class differences, and finding your voice in an unjust world. The character of Baby was perfect for her, intelligent, naive, determined, and ready for transformation. The director, Emile Ardolino, was known throughout Hollywood for his sensitivity with actors and his ability to create intimate, emotional performances. But there was one problem they needed to discuss, one potential obstacle to what promised to be the opportunity of a lifetime. "They want Patrick Swayze for Johnny Castle," her agent said carefully, already anticipating her reaction. "I know you two had some difficulties during Red Dawn, but this is a completely different kind of project, and Patrick's dance background makes him perfect for the role." Jennifer's reaction was immediate, visceral, and absolutely non-negotiable. "No, absolutely not. I will not work with Patrick Swayze again, not ever, not under any circumstances." Her voice was shaking with the force of her conviction. "I don't care how perfect he might be for the role. I don't care if he's the only actor in Hollywood who can dance. I will not put myself through that hell again." Her agent tried to reason with her, to convince her that this situation would be different. "Jennifer, this could be a huge opportunity for you. The script is incredible, and the character could really showcase your range as an actress. Patrick is actually a classically trained dancer. He studied at some of the most prestigious ballet schools in New York. He might be completely different in this environment, working on a love story instead of a war film." But Jennifer had made up her mind with the certainty of someone who had endured genuine trauma. "You don't understand what he put me through," she said. "Patrick Swayze is incapable of being collaborative or supportive. He has to dominate every situation and control every person around him. He would destroy this beautiful story, and he would destroy me in the process. I don't care if he's Mikhail Baryshnikov and Fred Astaire rolled into one. I will not work with Patrick Swayze again." Producer Linda Gottlieb faced an impossible situation. Jennifer Grey was already attached to the project and was absolutely perfect for Baby. She had exactly the right combination of innocence and intelligence, vulnerability, and strength that the character required. Her screen test had been luminous, and everyone involved in the project was excited about working with her. But the list of male actors who could handle the intensive dancing requirements of Johnny Castle was extremely short, and Patrick Swayze was at the very top of that list. Patrick's extensive training at the Harkness and Joffrey Ballet Schools in New York made him one of the few Hollywood actors who could believably play a professional dance instructor. More than that, his unique combination of masculine toughness and graceful sensuality was exactly what the character of Johnny Castle required. He could be strong and protective while also being tender and vulnerable. He could handle the film's more physical scenes while also delivering the emotional intimacy that the love story demanded. Jennifer was unmoved by these arguments. She had thought long and hard about her experience with Patrick, and she was convinced that his behavior on Red Dawn revealed his true character rather than being an aberration caused by the military training environment. "You don't understand the depth of what he's capable of," she said, her voice heavy with remembered pain. "Patrick Swayze is fundamentally incapable of treating other people as equals. He has to be the center of attention, the person in control, the one with all the power. He would turn this beautiful, intimate story into another vehicle for his ego, and he would make my life miserable in the process." Meanwhile, Patrick Swayze was fighting his own desperate battles to get the role of Johnny Castle. His career was at a critical crossroads, and he knew it. After Red Dawn, he had appeared in several films that had failed to showcase his unique combination of toughness and sensitivity. Grandview, USA had been a disappointment. Youngblood had shown promise, but hadn't broken through to mainstream success. His agents were telling him he needed to choose between being an action star or a dramatic actor, but Patrick knew that Johnny Castle would allow him to be both. The role was perfect for him in ways that went far beyond his dance training. Johnny Castle was everything Patrick had always wanted to be as a performer: strong but not cruel, confident but not arrogant, protective but not controlling. The character represented a chance for Patrick to show the world a different side of himself. The gentle and vulnerable man that his wife, Lisa Niemi, knew existed beneath the tough exterior that Hollywood had come to expect from him. When Patrick learned that Jennifer Grey was the primary obstacle to his casting, he was devastated. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same behavior that had destroyed his relationship with Jennifer was now threatening to cost him the role that could save his career. "I knew I had made terrible mistakes during Red Dawn," he wrote later in his autobiography, The Time of My Life. "I had been so focused on proving myself worthy of leading the group that I forgot we were all just actors trying to do our best work. I had let my insecurities and my need to be perfect turn me into exactly the kind of person I never wanted to be." But knowing he had been wrong didn't solve his immediate problem. How could he convince Jennifer to give him another chance when she had every reason to refuse? How could he prove that he had changed when she wouldn't even consider being in the same room with him? The answer came from an unexpected source: the person who knew him better than anyone else in the world, his wife, Lisa Niemi. Lisa had been Patrick's partner since they were teenagers, meeting when she was just 15 years old and taking dance classes at his mother's studio in Houston. She had seen him at his best and his worst, had loved him through his struggles with his domineering mother and his complicated relationship with his own masculinity. She understood the pressures that had driven his behavior during Red Dawn, but she also knew that the man who had terrorized Jennifer Grey was not the man she had fallen in love with. Lisa's words gave Patrick an idea that was either inspired or completely insane. Instead of trying to go through agents or producers, instead of making official appointments or following Hollywood protocol, he would approach Jennifer directly. He would show up at her door, humble and vulnerable, and ask for just 15 minutes of her time to apologize properly and show her that he had changed. It was a risky strategy that could easily backfire. If Jennifer refused to see him, or if their meeting went badly, it would probably end any chance of him getting the role. But Patrick knew it was his only shot at redemption. On a cold Tuesday morning in March 1986, Patrick stood outside Jennifer's apartment building in Manhattan, gathering the courage for what might be the most important conversation of his life. He hadn't called ahead, hadn't made an appointment, Hadn't even told his agent what he was planning to do. He simply showed up, walked into the lobby, and asked the doorman to ring Jennifer's apartment. "Tell her Patrick Swayze is here," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Tell her I just need 5 minutes to apologize for what happened during Red Dawn." The doorman, clearly skeptical about this unusual request, made the call. Patrick waited in the lobby, his heart pounding, prepared for Jennifer to refuse to see him or to have building security escort him out. To his amazement and relief, after a long pause, Jennifer agreed to see him. As he rode the elevator up to her floor, Patrick tried to organize his thoughts to find the right words for what might be his only chance to make things right. When Jennifer opened her apartment door, Patrick could see the wariness and suspicion in her eyes. She was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but she held herself like someone prepared for a fight, someone who had been hurt before and wasn't about to let it happen again. "What do you want, Patrick?" she asked, not inviting him in, clearly ready to slam the door if he gave her any reason to feel threatened. Patrick took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would determine everything. "I want to apologize," he said simply. "I want to tell you what really happened during Red Dawn, why I behaved the way I did, and I want to ask for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to try to make things right." Jennifer studied his face for a long moment, looking for any sign of the arrogance or manipulation she remembered from Colorado. What she saw instead was genuine humility and what appeared to be real remorse. After a pause that felt like forever, she stepped aside and let him enter her apartment. They sat in her living room, an awkward distance apart, on her couch, both of them knowing that the next few minutes would change everything. Patrick looked down at his hands, gathering the courage to say what he had come to say. When he looked up at Jennifer, she could see that his eyes were already bright with unshed tears. "Jennifer," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "what I did during Red Dawn was unforgivable. I let my insecurities and my need to prove myself turn me into a bully. I made your life miserable, and I made the whole experience worse for everyone involved. There's no excuse for what I did, and I don't expect you to forgive me. I just need you to know that I understand how wrong I was." Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral, but her heart beginning to soften despite her best efforts to remain guarded. Patrick continued, his voice growing stronger, even as the tears began to flow freely down his cheeks. "I was terrified during that training camp, Jennifer. I was the oldest member of the cast, and I felt like I had to prove I belonged there, that I wasn't just some aging dancer trying to play soldier. My father had always taught me that showing weakness was the worst thing you could do, that real men never let anyone see them vulnerable or uncertain. So I overcompensated," Patrick continued, his voice breaking with the weight of his confession. "I became this controlling, demanding person that I didn't even recognize. But the worst part, the part that makes me sick to think about, is that I took out all my fears and insecurities on you. You were the most talented person in that cast, the most genuine, and instead of supporting you and learning from you, I tried to tear you down to make myself feel better. I made you a target for my own cowardice." By this point, Patrick was openly crying, and Jennifer could see that his emotion was completely genuine. This wasn't the calculated manipulation of someone trying to get what he wanted. This was raw, honest remorse from someone who had done real work on understanding his own failures. "There's no excuse for what I did," he whispered. "There's no justification that makes it okay. I was wrong, and I hurt you, and I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it." Then Patrick said the 5 words that would save Dirty Dancing. 5 words whispered through tears that would change the course of movie history. "Just one chance, Jennifer. Please." He looked up at her with eyes full of pain and hope. "I know you don't want me for this movie, and I understand why. But please give me one chance to show you the person I really am. Not the person I was during Red Dawn, but the man who fell in love with dance because it taught me how to be gentle, how to support a partner instead of dominating them. Jennifer sat in stunned silence, feeling the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. She had expected Patrick to make excuses, to minimize what had happened during Red Dawn, maybe even to blame her for being too sensitive or unprofessional. She had not expected this raw, honest acknowledgement of his mistakes. She had not expected to see Patrick Swayze, the man who had seemed so invulnerable and controlling, completely broken down and vulnerable before her. "Patrick," Jennifer said quietly, her own voice thick with emotion, "why is this role so important to you? Why are you here, in my living room, crying and begging me for a chance? You're an established actor with a career. Surely there are other roles, other opportunities." Patrick wiped his eyes and took a shaky breath before answering. "Because Johnny Castle is who I am inside, Jennifer. He's who I've been trying to become since Red Dawn ended. He's tough when he needs to be, but he's also tender. He's protective, but he's not controlling. He believes in people and brings out the best in them instead of tearing them down. Playing Johnny would let me show the world the person I've been working so hard to become, the man my wife fell in love with, the man I was before fear and insecurity turned me into someone I hated." Jennifer looked at Patrick for a long moment, studying his face, searching for any trace of the domineering figure who had made her life miserable in Colorado. What she saw instead was someone who had clearly done serious work on himself, someone who had faced his flaws honestly and was genuinely trying to change. The man sitting in her living room was broken, humble, and completely different from the Patrick Swayze who had humiliated her in front of their cast and crew. "If I agree to this," Jennifer said slowly, "if I agree to do the screen test with you, I need you to understand something. If you show even a hint of the behavior you showed during Red Dawn, if you try to control me, or demean me, or make me feel small in any way, I'm out. No second chances, no explanations, no apologies. I will walk away from this project and never look back, no matter how much it costs me professionally." Patrick nodded eagerly, relief flooding his face. "I understand completely. And Jennifer, I want you to know something else. If somehow we do get cast in this together, if somehow you give me this incredible gift of a second chance, I promise you that I will spend every day of production proving to you that I've changed. I will be the partner you deserve, not the nightmare I was before." 3 days later, on a crisp Friday morning in March, Patrick and Jennifer met at a dance studio in Manhattan for their screen test with director Emil Ardolino and the nervous producers. The studio was small and intimate, with mirrors covering the walls and soft, natural light streaming through tall windows. Both actors were nervous, but for completely different reasons. Patrick knew this was his chance to prove he had changed, while Jennifer wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her career by giving him another opportunity. The scene they were testing was the iconic moment when Johnny teaches Baby the basic mambo steps, a scene that required not just technical dancing skill, but genuine chemistry and trust between the performers. As the cameras began rolling, something magical happened. Patrick's natural talent as a dancer, combined with his newfound humility and vulnerability, created an entirely different energy than anyone in the room had expected. Instead of dominating the scene with his superior dance skills, Patrick focused entirely on supporting Jennifer. Instead of showing off his technical abilities, he made sure she looked good, felt confident, and was able to shine. When Jennifer stumbled during a particularly complex sequence, Patrick caught her with such grace and reassurance that it looked choreographed rather than accidental. His hands were gentle but strong, his eyes encouraging rather than critical. "Cut!" called director Emil Ardolino after the first take. The room was silent for a moment as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The chemistry between Patrick and Jennifer was undeniable, electric in a way that couldn't be manufactured or forced. More importantly, their dynamic was absolutely perfect for Johnny and Baby. Patrick's strength and experience balanced beautifully with Jennifer's vulnerability and determination. They looked like two people who could believably fall in love through dance. Producer Linda Gottlieb turned to Jennifer, her eyes bright with excitement. "Well?" she asked, though the answer was already obvious to everyone in the room. Jennifer looked at Patrick, who was waiting anxiously for her response, and she could see the hope and fear warring in his eyes. She could see the knowledge that his entire future might depend on her next words. And more importantly, she could see the genuine humility and respect that had been completely absent during Red Dawn. "Let's do another take," Jennifer said, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "I want to try the lift sequence." Patrick's face broke into the first genuine smile Jennifer had seen from him since the day they met, a smile full of gratitude and relief and something that looked like the beginning of real friendship. The next take was even better than the first. When Patrick lifted Jennifer above his head in the climactic move of the scene, their eyes locked, and everyone in the room could feel the electricity between them. It was the moment that would eventually be recreated in front of millions of viewers worldwide, the moment that would become one of the most iconic images in film history. But its power was already evident in that small rehearsal studio. They had found their Johnny and Baby. After the screen test, Jennifer and Patrick walked out of the studio together, stepping into the bright Manhattan sunlight. The tension that had existed between them for nearly 2 years was gone, replaced by something that felt like the beginning of mutual respect and possibly even friendship. "Patrick," Jennifer said as they reached the street corner where they would part ways, "I want you to know something. The man who just danced with me in there, the man who supported me and made me feel confident and beautiful, that's the man I wish I had met during Red Dawn." Patrick nodded, his eyes still bright with tears of relief and gratitude. "That man has always been there, Jennifer. I just forgot how to let him out. I let my fears and insecurities turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Thank you for giving me the chance to remember who I really am. And thank you for helping me become the person I want to be." Dirty Dancing went on to become one of the most beloved films in cinema history, earning over $214 million worldwide against its modest $6 million budget, and launching both Patrick and Jennifer to unprecedented levels of stardom. But more importantly, the chemistry that audiences fell in love with on screen was real, born from Patrick's willingness to be vulnerable and Jennifer's extraordinary courage to forgive someone who had genuinely wronged her. Their relationship during the filming of Dirty Dancing was everything their relationship during Red Dawn had not been. It was supportive, collaborative, playful, and marked by the kind of mutual respect that creates great art. Patrick never once reverted to his old patterns of controlling behavior. Instead, he proved day after day that he had truly changed, that the apology he had offered in Jennifer's living room was genuine and lasting. Patrick Swayze's transformation from the controlling, insecure figure he had been during Red Dawn to the generous, supportive partner he became during Dirty Dancing proved that people can change when they're willing to do the hard work of honest self-reflection. His tearful apology to Jennifer Grey didn't just save Dirty Dancing. It saved Patrick's career, restored Jennifer's faith in the possibility of human growth, and taught both of them lessons about humility, forgiveness, and collaboration that they carried with them for the rest of their lives. In the years after Dirty Dancing, Patrick often spoke about the importance of that moment in Jennifer's living room, calling it one of the most crucial conversations of his life. Learning to apologize sincerely, without excuses or justifications, was one of the most important skills I ever developed, he said in a 1995 interview. Not just as an actor, but as a human being. That conversation with Jennifer taught me that true strength comes from admitting your weaknesses and working to overcome them, not from trying to hide them or compensate for them by hurting other people. Jennifer, for her part, often spoke about the courage it took to forgive Patrick and give him a second chance. "I learned that holding on to anger and resentment was hurting me more than it was hurting him," she said. "When I saw how genuinely he had changed, how much work he had done on himself, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the prison of my own bitterness. The story of Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey reminds us that everyone deserves a second chance when they're genuinely committed to change. It shows us that the greatest victories in life often come from our moments of greatest vulnerability. It proves that true strength isn't about never making mistakes. It's about having the courage to admit when we're wrong and the determination to become better people. The 5 words Patrick whispered through his tears, "Just one chance, Jennifer, please," didn't just save Dirty Dancing. They saved a friendship, transformed 2 careers, and gave the world one of its most cherished love stories. They remind us that sometimes the most powerful words in any language are also the simplest ones. Please, thank you, I'm sorry, and most importantly, I was wrong. But perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that change is possible at any stage of life, that people are capable of growth and transformation if they're willing to do the difficult work of honest self-examination. Patrick Swayze's journey from bully to beloved leading man wasn't easy or quick. It required him to confront his deepest fears and insecurities, to admit his failures publicly, and to prove through his actions that his transformation was genuine and lasting. If this incredible story of redemption, forgiveness, and second chances moved you, remember that it's never too late to apologize sincerely, that true change is always possible when we're brave enough to face our mistakes honestly, and that the greatest love stories, both on screen and off, often begin with the courage to be vulnerable. The 5 words that saved Dirty Dancing remind us that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply admit you were wrong and mean it. Have you ever had to give someone a second chance after they truly changed? Have you ever been in Patrick's position needing to apologize for behavior you weren't proud of? Remember that everyone deserves the chance to grow, to change, and to become the person they were meant to be. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply admit you were wrong and mean it. If this story of second chances touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to apologize, to forgive, or to change. Hit like if you believe in redemption. Comment with your own story of forgiveness. Subscribe for more untold stories that remind us what really matters in life. Your wisdom and experience matter. Thank you for watching.